Guys, just before we get started, if you're loving the podcast, can you please go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and please make sure that you subscribe on whatever channel that you listen to us on. It helps us out dramatically.
That one of the hugest differences between a founder mindset and an employee mindset is the velocity, frequency, and intensity of the feedback loop, right? So we all have like needs-based learning that we do. We Google a word or we watch a help video or whatever it is, right? As an employee, though, like you get to do that learning and you do it and you test it out, and like 90% of companies have pretty crappy performance management and accountability. So even if you completely mess it up, you're probably okay. As a result of that, you don't have any really high intensity learnings, and the frequency of that's typically a lot slower, right? Whereas in a founder, it's like, if this succeeds, you survive. If it doesn't, you die. Like the company, in some cases, literally ends, or you run out of money, right? So the intensity of each of those like loops of feedback is much higher, and also the frequency is much higher because you can't walk down the hallway to a friend in ops or a friend in PR or design to help you with something. It's like you've got no money, you've got no resources, no people, no nothing. So you have this needs-based learning with an incredibly intense high frequency feedback loop, which is why founder learning typically drastically outpaces that of employees, but purely because of the requirement for it too.
Yeah, we'll golden, baby girl, we'll golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us glow, cause we're golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can't ever break us down, cause we're golden.
All right, Toby, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for
We
having
just
me,
had an
man.
amazing conversation that was probably about a 10-minute conversation that we'll retouch on. But I'm really excited to chat with you. I think, and honestly, based on the conversation we just had, I think we've had a lot of guests on that may be great operators, or you've got a really great skill set in a particular function of a business. But I think, doing my research on yourself over the last week or so, but then I've been following for a little while. I think having a successful exit of a company, it's not something that a lot of people have been able to do.
Yeah.
And it's also not something that a lot of people at a young age have been able to do, which I think is a whole nother thing. Because like a lot of our audience are, they're young, and so it's not that they won't take value from say someone who's a lot older and has done it, but I think it's more, it can be a lot more relatable.
Yeah.
So really excited to chat to you just about all things business, but we might start with I guess your journey in business and kind of how did it all get started? Because I know you're a personal trainer initially.
Yep.
So that was, I originally was a personal trainer as well at a young age. So I'd love to kind of just hear the whole journey and we can maybe pull some lessons out.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, officially, I started my career, in business, as a personal trainer, which I don't very often add this context, but the transparency that's needed there is that I liked health and fitness, and personal training literally was a solution to a problem I had, which was, I'd gotten expelled from high school and sort of barely finished, and when I came out, I wanted to do a degree and had to sit a whole bunch of tests to get into it. So I get into this degree, a double degree in law and commerce, and I'm like, awesome, do it part-time for a year, and I'm like, I'm going nowhere. Like, this is too slow. So I had been working at, in another business at a music store, and was like, cool, what job's flexible enough to allow me to make enough
100%.
money to get by, right? And so personal training was like literally just a means to an end at that point. I'd been lifting weights and whatever for a while, and had always played sports, so I was into it. But I definitely was not the personal trainer that was like, I exist solely to kind of like change people's lives. I became very passionate about it, but that wasn't the initial reason for it. Got into that, and that was, my first kind of real independent job, basically, and that allowed me to kind of realize, well, if you do nothing happens, right? Like, you don't make any money. And so quickly realized that, then went through a whole series of kind of iterations to, boot camps. I was kind of providing consulting to large corporates on their, internal health schemes and a variety of things. And then eventually kind of stumbled across this thing called Instagram and the internet. And, after that, got into ebooks after having met Kayla, who's my partner at the time, and we yeah, we had some like pretty cool success with that. And then after a couple of years, through a whole variety of different sort of deliberate strategic thinking, went, well, we should do an app and et cetera, which eventually then became Sweat. And yeah, now we've sold the company for 9 figures. So
yeah, wow. So before we move on to the next question, I'd love to kind of go into, because it seems to me like you had that entrepreneurial kind of spirit in you from the very beginning. Because like I can resonate with that in the sense that I was a personal trainer, but it wasn't, and very much similar. Like it was like, because I tried to study at uni.
yeah,
It was the only thing that was going to work for me part-time. I ended up quitting uni and not doing it anyway.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you didn't just kind of stick to that route. Even when you were a PT, you talked about doing some consulting to corporates and discovering these kind of things. I'd love to hear a little bit about that entrepreneurial spirit in you, but also like education. So like where, you know, were you spending all this time learning through those periods about business, and that was where you spent most of your your time?
Yeah, so I think for a whole bunch of the wrong reasons, you know, as a much younger guy, I just wanted to win, right? Like I just wanted to win really badly, and to me at that point in time, you know, winning was getting from $1 to $2. So that was, you know, how I kind of measured my success, and probably to a degree, like even my value, my self-value, right? And so I, for a variety of reasons, kind of based on other experiences in my life earlier on, like I just had a really hardcore work ethic. Like, so to get to the gym at like 5:30 in the morning, you know, do clients for 5 or 6 hours, go to uni, come back, train, do another 5 or 6 hours, leave at 10 p.m., go home. Like that was quite normal. Like it never even registered to me that was abnormal. And so I, you know, was able to kind of fill up a lot of my sessions with, you know, customers early on, and, you know, sort of 2 or 3 months into that was like, oh, I'm like the busiest person here, you know, and was by virtue of that making the most money. And then I guess at this point in time, you know, I kind of that, you know, in some regards, you know, that unhealthy mentality of like, cool, but more. Yeah, but more. Then I had a lot of these sort of conversations with myself where I was like, well, how do I get more here? Like, there's only so many hours that the gym is open a day. Yeah, obviously I can charge a little bit more money per session. How's this work sort of thing? And so, little did I know, like I didn't really understand this at the time, but basically what I was doing was, you know, pushing to the limits within effectively like a time-based service business model. Like I was kind of like hitting the ceilings and going, the levers are number of hours in a day, dollars per hour, like, you know, what's the go here? And so I would sit there with like spreadsheets and my iPad at the time trying to figure out like, how do I resolve this problem? And eventually I kind of came to the conclusion of, well, hold on, really interesting opportunity here. There's these mums that come to the gym between like 8:30 and 12. I train heaps of them. They're all friends. Maybe I can train them together, give them a 20% discount per person or 30% discount per person, but do 2 at the same time. Mm-hmm. Revolutionary for me at the time. You know, pretty obvious reflection, but revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
You know, start doing that and increase my hourly rate by like 30 or 40%, like, you know, overnight. So then start doing more of that. And then eventually that led to, well, I could just do groups, like bigger groups, can't do it in the gym. Where do I do it? I was like, oh, there's a park across the road. You know, so literally set up some boot camps, which then kind of said, well, but hold on, how do I fill those with members? And this was my first kind of unofficial foray into subscription, right? You know, how do I get them to sign up and show up and retain and all this sort of junk? And that was great because I was like, oh, I'll go from making, you know, $60 an hour to 100, then 100 to $500 an hour, you know, and then, but now I need more hours because not everyone can train. You know, so same problem, different scenario. And off the back of, just kind of by chance, off the back of running those boot camps and doing some indoor stuff, I ended up having a few clients that work for large corporates, and they were like, oh, well, a couple of times a year, our business would love to have you come do this. Would you be able to run a class for like 50 or 60 people for $5,000 or $10,000? I was like, well, obviously. To me, that was like I'd, you know, struck gold. And then off the back of, you know, just did that for a little while for a couple of decent sized businesses in my hometown in Adelaide. And, then like the HR teams or whatever from those companies was like, oh, well, like, you know, do you have any materials that you could like give our, you know, employees so that we could have a look at, you know, like what's your philosophy on like, you know, nutrition and exercise, and how can, you know, this help our employees have better, better health, generally speaking, right? Which is for a lot of the very large businesses, are quite a big investment area, for their team members. Which then led me to, I was like, well, you know what? Like, I actually have been providing some of these, I don't even call them ebooks, just guides, at the time to some of my customers, because they were like, oh, can you write me workouts, or can you give me a suggestion for some healthy meals and recipes and such? And I was like, well, yeah, maybe I can augment that like into, packages, right? Which was informally kind of the inception of the ebook, model, which came to me. And so I was selling these things for like $60 to $100. They were pretty crappy at the time, and, compared to where I ended up. But that was what kind of led to that. And then that happened at the same time with these boot camps happening, and Instagram and social media and the internet kind of all, merging together. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of people online are like, well, hold on, I really like your boot camps. Can you come train me in Sydney? Or I'm in Russia or America, or countries I'd like never even heard of, didn't even know existed at this point. And so all of these steps were quite logical. It was like, well, I'm not going to run boot camps there. I can't control it. I can't control the quality of the trainer. I can't control that. I can only control this book. So, yeah, let's go ahead and do that, which is what Kayla and I, then sort of started doing. And throughout that journey, and then pretty much from here onwards, to your remark earlier around education, like the learning curve is like vertical, because there's too many problems to solve to keep up with, right? And that's really where... the intensity kind of like 10x basically.
It's an interesting, like the dichotomy of learning because you have no other choice to, and then also like, because I find that, and I this was me at one point as well, was like I spent a lot of time just learning and not actually, like doing. Yeah. And you can get stuck in that learning mentality and just kind of keep educating yourself through many different means for the sake of doing it, instead of going, no, like force yourself into a place where you have to learn the thing that's going to solve the problem that you're currently having.
Well, and the feedback loop, right? Like the velocity of feedback. So one of the things I try to explain to a lot of the team members that I work with, either at Sweat or at other companies now, is that one of the hugest differences between a founder mindset and an employee mindset is the velocity, frequency, and intensity of the feedback loop, right? So we all have like needs-based learning that we do. We Google a word, or we watch a help video, or whatever it is, right? As an employee, though, like you get to do that learning and you do it and you test it out, and like 90% of companies have pretty crappy performance management and accountability. So even if you completely mess it up, you're probably okay. As a result of that, you don't have any really high-intensity learnings, and the frequency of that's typically a lot slower, right? Whereas in a founder, it's like, if this succeeds, you survive. If it doesn't, you die. Like the company, in some cases, literally ends, or you run out of money, right? So the intensity of each of those like loops of feedback is much higher, and also the frequency is much higher, because you can't walk down the hallway to a friend in ops or a friend in PR or design to help you with something. It's like you've got no money, you've got no resources, no people, no nothing. So you have this needs-based learning with an incredibly intense high-frequency feedback loop, which is why founder learning typically drastically outpaces that of employees, but purely because of the requirement for it too.
Love it. And I think it just kind of talks to like business owners as well. Like if you are starting out, you spend more time doing the work that generating the sales and then solve a problem once it comes. Don't learn about what you need to do in 2 years when you don't need that right now.
It's an interesting thing, right? Like, and a lot of people, like a lot of people I met over the years, and some of the people I work with now, like they're constantly shocked at the discomfort. I'm like, what are you surprised about? Like you're in an incredibly unstable, uncertain, high-risk environment, dealing with things more often than not that you know nothing about. Like this is fully uncharted territory. It should suck. Like it should be really uncomfortable. Like, and that notion of like this is normal, like in inverted commas, this is normal. That when I meet with a lot of people, they're like, that's really alleviating, because I feel like this is crazy. And I'm like, the more crazy it is, it's probably more normal than what you actually realize and understand, right?
I find that a lot with the people management side as well. Like the confrontation that can happen in business. That in the early days, you're just like, you kind of almost take everything personal, and then once you get further on, you realize it's like, hey, none of this is personal. It's literally just what needs to happen to make sure we get to where we need to get to.
Yeah. Well, and this is like a interesting thing, right? I mean, I have, quite a firm view on, self-education in the sense that more books are sold that are like biographies or stories about a journey that happened than actual practical information and knowledge that can be applied, acutely, right? And then so, if you use kind of confrontation with employees or just, people in general in business, like people often wonder, they read, book X, Y, Z about this company, like, oh, but this company had that culture. It's like, cool, but how do they make decisions? And they're like, and they don't really know. And it's like, well, you can't expect to rely on this material to, perform this particular task, right? And all of the things in business, no matter how big the business is or small, early stage or mature, simple, complex, any industry, whatever, like all of these problems are almost exactly the same. If you extract the subject matter of, mechanical engineering or whatever it was that we were speaking about before, it's like people problems are still people problems. Like, they're either partners, contractors, employees. You measure their success the same way. Like, it's all one system, right?
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about before with your expertise and so on. I'd love to go into the early days of Safe Sweat now and kind of go, what were 2 or 3 things that you guys did really well that really helped it get off the ground? So trying to, extract lessons of like, if you're in a startup, what are those things that, you've experienced that you guys did that really helped you kind of grow and get to that next phase that you're looking for?
Yeah, so, headline statement, right? Understand growth, right? And that sounds like, really simple, but I can confidently say if you speak with 9 out of 10 founders and say, why is your business growing right now? They will not actually be able to articulate to you mechanically, like why is it actually growing? Why are you growing? Why are you succeeding? What does the next bit of growth look like? How's it going to happen? Et cetera, right? Growth like business or growth in business is really, it's a output, or an outcome of the system of operating the organization ultimately, right? And not a lot of people actually understand their business model. Not a lot of people actually understand, if I pull this lever, that might happen. Or if I invest money here, this might happen. Most growth is actually accidental, misunderstood, and most people appropriate it to spend more money on ads, right? But that's like such a it's a problem. It's not a problem until it is, right? Like that's the thing. Absolutely right. And so like understanding growth, probably also kind of pairs with this notion of like make your growth predictable, control the growth, don't grow too fast. And these are all things that, for each of these statements, sure, I could name or any other person that's in the business community could name, oh, but this company did. It's like, cool, but we don't want to make our decisions based on one freak story that happened. That's
the decision-making process for everybody. Why aren't we this?
Right.
It's like,
well, this is a thing, like you can read every Steve Jobs book, you can read Shoe Dog with Phil Knight, you can read The Culture Book by Netflix, you can read Facebook Story, all of those things. That's great, but they're not even unicorns. Like they're unicorns within unicorns. Like, yes, there's a lot to be learned. Like there is so much to be learned from those organizations, but there is millions of other businesses that were successful that had none of those criteria or characteristics, and it's, in my opinion, safer, and wiser to learn and understand how does any business grow? Why does it grow? What should we think about when growing? And try to operate a company that way. And if you find yourself in a 1 in 10 million or 1 in 100 million scenario, then do all the irrational things. But most people you talk to are not in that situation. So we should try to understand, kind of the principle, as opposed to the outlier, right? Yeah. But as a headline, right, like I think understanding growth in your business and your model and your industry is a really simple but very much misunderstood concept that I think people fall in the trap of. The advertising thing that you said before. People go, positive return on ad spend, more budget, and they go, awesome. What happens? Well, revenue goes up, gross margin goes down, EBITDA ratio goes down, a whole bunch of operational problems show up because they weren't, operationally structured. Oh shit, I can deliver 1,000 units, but I can't deliver 20,000 units a month. Crap, now I've got unhappy people. So all of these things are quite predictable, right? But people get too distracted by, but our revenue could be this big, or we have to grow at this percentage, as opposed to being like, well, cool, that's 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, but how do you exit? which comes right back to like, what is the long-term strategy? Like, how do all these decisions contribute to the big picture? It's a little naive to kind of go more ads, more money, right?
There's two threads there that I want to pull on a little bit, and for you to give some insight is, the first one is like, how, like when you say understand growth, like tactically, what does that look like? Because we can sit here and say understand growth.
Yep.
Me personally, I'd love for you to touch on data, because one thing in the early days that I found in business and just as well was like, to be able to understand growth, you have to have good data.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, that I feel like that's something that a lot of businesses don't do in the early days. So I'd love for you to touch on maybe what you think the tactics are and what goes into that. How do you actually start to understand growth for your company?
Yep.
And what we were talking about before. So the core objective of the business long term. So are you building a lifestyle? Are you building to sell? How does that change fundamentally, what it looks like, say, from 2 to 5 years, 5 to 7 and so on?
Yeah. So, this is all just off the cuff, right?
Yeah, of course.
So I would suggest, growth is an option. It is a choice, right? And what I mean by that is, at any given point in time, sit down in a business and go, the conversation doesn't start with how do we grow, right? Like, growth is a solution to a problem, right? Growth is not an obligation; it's a responsibility. So to kind of add some more context or flavor to that, if you're a business at any given point in time, all of your decisions, in my opinion, every decision should come back to your strategy always, right? Almost no startups have strategies, right?
But can you just explain what strategy is? Because again, I know it sounds like a really obvious question, but a lot of people I find will be like, "Oh, my marketing strategy."
Yep.
They're not kind of
the
bird's eye view.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do that. So I facilitate these like strategic planning days with founders, and most of them go sort of similarly at the beginning, because I normally start off the day by saying, "Cool, so we're here for a strategic planning day. What's a strategy?" Right? And so we normally spend about 30 minutes answering that question, right? And obviously some people have more or less experience. Some of these people have MBAs or degrees or whatever, right? But they normally start off similarly. And normally I go, "What is a strategy?" on a whiteboard or a piece of butcher's paper, and they go, "Cool, what's a plan?" I'm like, "Awesome, what's a plan?" Then the conversation sometimes pauses there, or sometimes there's a little bit about, stuff you're going to do to get some, to hit a goal or reach a goal or whatever. I'm like, cool, well, kind of on a more practical basis, we can expand that definition. So yes, we have a goal, of course. There's obviously work that has to be done to get to that goal. Yes, most people can kind of get that far. Then we can go, cool, but that work requires resources. So there's resources that have to go into that work. So then we can kind of get as far as saying, well, so far a strategy is a deliberate commitment of resources to work to achieve an outcome. Resources being time, money, human resources, whatever else it might be. Work can be anything, a task, a project, an initiative, doesn't matter. Anything that is done with these resources, right? And the outcomes can be varied, but typically people are building to an exit, or they're building to a revenue or EBITDA goal, or whatever it might be that they're building to, and there's nuance with that too. But even that definition is still technically not complete, because you don't go, I have resources, what work do I do? Oh, this is a great goal. In the same way that you don't go, I have a great goal, what work should I do? These are the resources. There's more that comes with that. And so at the beginning, really there's this articulation of reason or reasoning, right? So why? Why are you doing this? So I often, kind of propose, and this is my definition, it's not, you won't see this in Harvard Business School, right? But, to me, a strategy or a strategic plan really is an articulation of your reasoning and an explanation of your commitment of resources to work to achieve the outcomes that you've set, right? So how does that relate to growth? Well, growth might be a goal, so you shouldn't just grow. You should say, well, we want to hit this number, growth is required. What is the method of growth that we will choose to achieve this goal, which has a whole bunch of other considerations that come with it. So when we talk about understanding growth, it's firstly, to contextualize it, growth is a process and a system that's applied to achieve the outcome as a part of your strategy. It's not just spend more money.
It's not the objective.
Correct.
Yeah,
right.
okay.
You might, and so again, to provide more flavor here, it's like, well, we are currently worth $20 million. I want to sell the business for $50 million. What is the financial profile that this business must have to feasibly and fairly be valued at $50 million? Well, it's XYZ. Cool. Therefore, I have to grow revenue, EBITDA, and, gross margin to hit these numbers. Awesome. So it's not just revenue. Yeah, we have to maintain a gross margin. We have to manage OPEX. We have to look at, how we actually achieve that sustainably. So then all of a sudden, when we talk about understanding growth,
Sorry, I got
you're
the
right.
hiccups.
You're right. So then we talk about understanding growth. Well, all of a sudden there's a lot more considerations, right? It's like, well, okay, so growth actually to us at this point in time for our business at this stage of the journey means this. We want to achieve that, making sure that it's not because you don't want a line to go up and then come back down. So then it has to be sustainable. Well, what's sustainable growth look like? Well, unit economic feasibility, channel dependency, supply dependency, audience dependency. There's so many. I could be here. I could be here for days,
exactly,
right?
100%. Yeah.
But the fact that I can go in 5 minutes, go to that point and ask 5 or 10 questions that instantly break so many of the kind of automatic decisions that people make to grow their business is a really good conversation starter for founders, because if they can't comfortably answer those and hand on heart go I've actually considered it and I have a legitimate answer, not just oh shit, this sounds kind of like a good response. Instantly you should go, well, should you be growing? Because growth, being able to grow a business is a capability, no different to being able to do marketing or being able to do product design. It's a skill set, right? But that skill set has to be based on good reasoning. Yeah, and just to add context to this, the reason, one of the primary reasons why I understand this is because I made all of those mistakes.
Yeah, of course.
I was the guy that was like, oh my God, our LTV to CAC is awesome. Let's just jack up ad spend and 3x the size of the company. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, well, the app is breaking. Team members are unhappy. We have no we have no feasible and sustainable org structure. Oh, yeah, shit, we did talk about selling the company. Oh, what's that mean we need? Oh, all of a sudden the margin's gone. And so all these problems present themselves. We almost blew up the company, my fault entirely, as a result of trying to do that, So it's kind of, I forget what the saying is, but it's like a baptism with fire or whatever, right? I learned all this and got burnt on the way through, which is why I'm super, apprehensive, about kind of this committing other organizations to just grow, right?
Yes. So there's a lot there, but I think I found the interesting part of, and this almost takes us to that next fundamental phase in the business, right? Is okay, you're trying to achieve growth at all costs as a startup because you kind of have to, but then, in my opinion, you kind of reach, there will be a point, and it's going to be different for the different types of businesses and so on, but there is a point where your unit economics will change fundamentally, right? Because there's more, like you said, operationally, to deliver this, and you said it before, to deliver this 5,000 times, as a rough example, random number, to do that at, say, 20,000 units is very different. And I've seen this in a business who had rapid growth, and it was a service, but every, there was, I think, 25 employees in the business, 24 of them generated revenue.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be the next phase. I'd love for you and touching on that, because, and this could get a little bit deep on some knowledge based stuff, but I found, and we can tie this back into strategy, because I think it'll be a good kind of lesson for people, especially for people in the beginning, how, when we're talking strategy, how far into the future are you thinking, right? Because I think that's in itself a big one. And then what are the different phases that we've just talked about where, we were just kind of mentioned, where you get to that point where there's going to need to be more support and operational investment to support, the growth that you are having. And can you touch on as well? There's a lot of questions there, I know that, but they all kind of tie in, when isn't it a good time to grow?
Yeah, good question, right? So yeah, it's to probably a short answer to that last one, right? It's not a good time to grow if it's not going to positively contribute to the long-term goal. In short, right? So and to kind of cascade that, it's like, well, if you're losing money on every customer you acquire, it's obviously not a good idea. That's not going to contribute to the long term. If you're going to grow, but then you can't keep up with it, and then you have to invest a whole bunch of money to kind of backtrack to move forward, that's probably not a good thing either, right? Yeah. So I think the simple logic is if growth is not an answer that or a process that can contribute to your long-term goal, there's more to think about. And I think as well, a lot of people have this kind of mystic or mystified view of growth, that it's just here to here, and it's linear, right? In relation to what you were getting at before, it's like, cool, 5,000 units to 20,000 units of production. Theoretically, economics says that you should achieve economies of scale and it should get cheaper per unit over time. Maybe. But marketing says that normally, as you continue to excel and push channels and push audiences, as frequency goes up, you get degrading returns. So that's not great for economics, like unit economics over time. Also, when you think about growth of an organization, right? You don't do 10% more units and then get 10% more staff. You don't go, oh, I needed an arm and a leg of an ops person to help with freight and distribution, right? So you have these lumps of costs that come in over time, and you're constantly, to a degree, forward investing, right? And so it's not A, B, C, D, in a perfect line, right? The revenue might look a little bit like that, very rarely, right? But the expenses go doof, stepped like this over time, because that's the way that the business works. You can't recruit half a person more often than not, right? In terms of how far are we looking into the future? When strategic planning, I think the first thing is that strategic planning is an action that you should do every single day, right? And that's a very controversial statement. People go, oh, but we plan 3 times a year and that's all we do. It's like, okay, awesome. But if you're doing it 3 times a year, there's 362 opportunities you're missing to get better at what you're doing, right? So strategic planning or strategic thinking or running an organization, that way, that philosophy really is that everything you do every day ultimately should contribute to the strategy, either updating the strategy, executing against the strategy, or learning more about whether the strategy is right. If you kind of get more direct at the question and go, well, we are actually writing the document, how often should we write the document? Normally, the way that I consider this is that because a strategy or business plan is ultimately an artifact, it's a document that you create. There's different sections of it that will look further or more far or less far into the future, and there's sections of it that will change more and less frequently, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, setting big, hairy, audacious goals, and aiming many, many years into the future, that probably won't change that often. You might set that at the beginning of your journey and you might update it every couple of years, right? And that normally would be looking 5 years into the future or 3 to 5 years into the future, right? The next level below that, the way that my philosophy of this is, well, then I kind of come back to 12 months, right? So, and the question that I propose there is that if this is our goal 3 to 5 years into the future, where we want to get, what are the immediately obvious things that we need to achieve in the next 12 months to move us directionally closer to that? And normally frame those up with objectives or how focus areas, whatever word people want to use. Yeah. And then I go one layer beneath that and I go, cool, so if that's what we have to do in this 12-month period, what work do I need to achieve this quarter to move us closer to that 1 year thing? And so the way that I very, very often articulate this is that, you're never going to be able to aim perfectly accurate, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, depending on what business you're in, into the future. So create a ring fence around what is categorically true, right? To allow you to then, I refer to this as cascading, to then cascade to a year, cascade to a quarter. Because the reality is you can't even aim 12 months into the future, especially with young companies. How could you possibly? You don't even know what feature set you're going to be building in 3 weeks. No. There's no way. So,
can you give me an example of what you mean by categorically true? So because you're talking about in 7 years.
Yep.
So what kind of research goes into that, and what is that, for a company trying to set that potentially for themselves?
Yeah.
Because I know that's a difficult thing to do.
Sure.
Look that far in. What does that look like?
Yeah. So my answer to pretty much every question in business is the same thing. It depends, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so to frame that up, I'd suggest if you're an organization like Apple, what planning are you doing for 10 years? Well, you're going, what are the mega macro demographic trends that are occurring, industry trends that are occurring, and where do we want to dump like hundreds of millions of dollars? And so right now they're going, or over the last 3 to 5 years, and for the next 3 to 5, they're going, awesome. Like OTT and streamed entertainment, Apple Music, Apple TV, cool. OTT gaming, arcade, they've obviously invested there and will continue to. Then they're going, cool, what are the next massive 5 to 10 year, mega macro trends? Healthcare, and they've already been there for like 10 plus years anyway, right? That's the way that they're thinking. For an organization that's much younger, not that style of thinking is useless, but it's certainly less valuable. Why? Well, you don't even have 7 months in some cases or 7 years of trading history. Very hard to use any internal or historical data. What most people are doing for the first 2, 3, 4 years of their business is really ultimately validating their initial hypothesis, which is this market wants this product.
Yeah.
And then trying to move their product and market closer together to get product market fit, which is an interesting term in itself. So when it comes to like planning for 3, 5, 7 years, normally the headlines are quite similar. It's like, we have some stupid, huge, hairy, audacious goal that we want to achieve. Sell for $1 squillion, whatever it might be. Let's just use that as an example, right? Well, if your goal is to sell a business, any business, a whole bunch of things are categorically true. No one wants to work for 5 to 7 years to sell a company they have to work in for another 5 to 7 years. And if you do, you're massively the minority, right?
Yeah.
So if that's true, well, instantly one objective has to be to design a company that's not relying on you. That's categorically true, right? If you want to sell a business, normally you want to sell it where you can sell it at a point in time on its maturity curve where you're achieving what I would refer to as value maximization. No one wants to sell a company for less than they think it's worth. That's categorically true. So therefore, there's a whole bunch of criteria. We must be accelerating growth at a percentage of year on year. We must have certain financial profile. Mm-hmm. We must be able to sell a story that indicates significant future growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all categorically true. So even if you just use those two examples and you go, let's say that's 5 to 7 years. Well, instantly for this year, cool. How do I continue to design our organization to make it less dependent on me? And so it's like, we'll implement these controls, recruit these people, design the company structure this way, get rid of these tasks off my desk. Things as simple and as small as that, right? Because that contributes to the end goal, right? But a lot of people are spending more of their time figuring out, how do I make money? And that question is totally valid for people who are maybe in year 1 or year 2. But after you've gotten to the point where you can validate that you're selling stuff, it instantly all becomes about 5 to 7 years normally anyway. If you're spending all your time figuring out after 2 or 3 years, can I sell a product? It's like you probably have other questions to ask about, your business feasibility.
All right, guys, I want to give a massive shout out to our major sponsors, BizCover. Without them, we do not get to have the amazing conversations that we're having. And today we're going to talk about fitness business owners, public liability insurance, professional indemnity insurance. The reality is, if you own your own gym, if you are a contractor at a gym, or you're an online coach, you're going to need to have your business insured, because giving out expertise and running a service in a particular location is going to mean that something can go wrong and you may be liable. And if these things happen, I know that for a small business owner, it can be so detrimental to growth, it can be added stress, and it can potentially be fatal for your business. So if you aren't insured, check these guys out. And if you are insured, guess what? It's super easy. It's paperless. You can get insured in 20 minutes and they will give you the best price on insurance that you've seen. Love the business. I've actually been insured with them for 10 years. So their website's in the show notes. Check it out and go get yourself insured. All right, fitness business owners, this one's for you. I was once a personal trainer. I was running my own personal training business, and I've been involved in many other health and fitness businesses. And the biggest problem that I had, and that I know many other fitness business owners have, is all the back end admin, your operations, and everything that helps your business operate and run efficiently. So when eMay Services reached out and asked to sponsor the podcast, I was like 100%, because I just know how much of a pain point that is for so many businesses. eMay Services are virtual assistants. They are your fairy godmothers that help you run and scale your business so that you can do the things that you should be focusing on and not have to worry about the back end. So whether it is your back end admin or operations or creating additional products that allow you to increase revenue, these guys are the missing piece to your business. They will help you scale. They will help you spend more time on the things that you should be spending time on while they take care of the rest. Massive advocate for this service. Wish I had it when I was in my fitness business. Head to emaservices.com.au. The link will be in the show notes, so head there, click on the link, and reach out to the team to see how they can help you. And I think look, the reason I ask that is like, because I think to understand what is categorically true, I think especially into the future, that is a really hard question to answer.
It's abstract. Exactly,
right? So, but I think you definitely cleared that up, which I really like the way you thought about it. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, okay, you get your startup off the ground, maybe year 3, year 4. What's that next? What are the things that take you to the next phase in business where, obviously, and I really love what we've talked about in terms of, what's your objective, lifestyle business, is it to sell?
Yep.
Once you do get to that year 3 or 4, what are the things that you need to start thinking about? And what were some of the, I guess, challenges and tension points that you guys had, and kind of how did you break through those to kind of get to that eventual endpoint?
Yeah, well, let's so maybe we'll come at this. Let's come at this from the angle of we have a company. The assumption is that they want to sell at some point in the next 3 to 7 years, right? And one of the problems that they're having is that they're looking at their organisation and going, oh, well, we have key man risk because we have talent. I'm going to use Sweat as a case study, right? So we have key man risk as a real issue in our organisation, right? So we have to design away from that. The key man risk in Sweat's business was obviously talent. We worked with, early on, one big trainer, Kayla. She was the main marketing asset, the main product asset, the main brand asset, all this sort of stuff, right? So we go, okay, cool, we have to address that, number one. Like, 2, how do we create a growth profile when we were seeking like 30 to 50%, top line growth year on year, while maintaining healthy unit economics? How do we achieve that? How do we address those 2 problems? Let's just use those, right?
They're 2 ones that I think are going to be very helpful for people.
Yeah. So the key man risk thing is, really straightforward. It's like, well, don't be relying on one person. Don't be relying on them for marketing, for brand, and for product. Pretty simple. That's a pretty simple thing to figure out. But then the complex thing is, well, okay, how do we do that? How do we actually execute that? How do we make it feel authentic? And then how do we make sure that because that's an investment, right? How do we make sure that investment then contributes to the second goal, which is design this growth profile that we like, right? Before I get into this growth profile thing, one headline sentence, which I very much believe to be true, is that every single decision in business is an investment decision. Every single one. Like, if you buy this table, you expect to get a return from it one way or another, right? If you buy a computer, if you recruit an employee, if you pay an influencer to do something, they're all investment decisions, right? It's just that people very often only consider marketing decisions as investment decisions. And that's a really big, kind of flaw for a lot of people, right? Why do I say that? Well, because as we consider, designing for growth, right? It's like trying to remove key man risk as an investment. We won't get that return until we successfully achieve exit, but we're investing in increasing the probability that we can sell the company because we identify key man risk as being a big blocker, right? So when we look at that, that's the return, at least one of the returns that we're looking for here. When we look at the growth profile piece, I kind of sat back and said, I was like, well, the growth is going to slow down because we're reliant on one marketing asset. We're selling one product, and I'll kind of define what that is in a sec, and we're selling it to one market. We have to resolve that. So what does growth look like? How does growth happen? Growth categorically really only can happen on one of 2 dimensions or a combination of both. You can only grow through product or market, or a combination of both. And what I mean by that is that you can sell the same product to the same market and do more. You can optimize it. You can get greater market penetration and product penetration. You can go to a new market expansion. You can go to an entirely new market development. And on the product side, you can either sell the same product, you can slightly change a product to sell something different that's similar, product expansion, or you can come up with an entirely new product unit, right? There's more to that for people who want to look at it. The Ansoff growth matrix is a great visualization of that for those of you playing at home with access to Google, right? So if that's true, at that point in time, I'm like, cool, we're going to make an investment to fix key man risk. We're also going to make some investments to grow the business. What does this look like? Well, we want to get to a new audience and we want to bring in new talent to create new content streams, which is a new product. So we did product and market expansion at the same time. So we said, okay, well, I'm going to invest in bringing in other trainers that will do gym workouts or yoga workouts or Pilates workouts or whatever they might have been, because at that point in time we were only doing minimal equipment at home, high intensity, one product that suits one audience, right? By doing that, we're expanding our product footprint. That's also making us more appealing to new customers, but we specifically want to find people that allow us to do that have a decent audience size, because then that then makes us less dependent on one brand asset. So that helps us remove key man risk, right? So you can already see this is very multifactorial, right? It's not like problem A, solution B. There's a lot more that goes into it. So we're like, okay, cool. Well, we'll do that because that'll diversify the consumption of content that happens on our platform. We have greater marketing assets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And that was the key reason for us pivoting from Kayla only to other trainers, right? Because we were like, well, in 3 to 5 years, we want to sell the company. No one's going to buy it if it's just Kayla. Mm-hmm. That's pretty obvious. Oh, well, we could have just done yoga with Kayla, not that she was into yoga, but we could have made it happen. But that wouldn't have been really authentic, and it wouldn't have solved key man risk, right? So there's like lots more considerations here, but as an example and as a case study, right, that's an example of saying, well, we want to exit. This is a barrier to exit. How do we address this barrier or that barrier to exit? What are we going to invest in to do that? And then ultimately executing it. Fortunately, that worked to a degree, and it ended up being, you know, like a really good decision. In hindsight, not all decisions were good decisions for sure.
Yeah.
But that's a really interesting example of, you know, kind of pausing at a moment in time and saying, well, we're looking 3, 5, 7 years into the future. We're making a decision about things that we believe to be true here, and we're going to take action today to move in that direction, because we'd already had, you know, feedback from other venture funds and whatever that was already a headline problem, and it was a pretty logical problem to have anyway. So.
That is, so that's really that's so interesting, and I think there's a question I want to ask around the investment side of it. So so measuring return. Like I would imagine that when you go from, you know, Kayla and you know, that one asset to then having to bring other people into the company that have their own assets that eventually fund in. That's the unit economic kind of question that kind of comes into it of like, okay, well, we're bringing more people in over here. That's at a cost. And then we are expecting to bring in more customers over here. And that's where we're expanding. And obviously, I think it does talk to the you know, when you were talking, I'm kind of going, this makes a lot of sense, because it does really talk to the idea that you do have to have a long-term strategy. Because I feel like a lot of businesses would run into trouble because they don't have that long-term strategy, and then they're trying to solve problems that are only in the next 1 to 6 months. Yeah,
and that's unfortunately, like this actually highlights a really like fascinating insight that I provide to a lot of people I work with. You know, like straight up off the top of my head, I can think of like 4 or 5 people that I've had this exact conversation with, in slightly different ways. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, I want to exit for $30 million in 7 years' time. And I'm like, okay. What, like, out of every single goal you've ever set yourself in your life, how many of them did you achieve exactly the amount and exactly at the right time? And the answer is obviously not many, if any, right? So you go, cool. But you only ever roughly get as far as you aim or as high as you aim. So why don't you sell for $300 million? And instead of doing it in 7 years, why don't you do it in 3 years? And they're like, well, but that seems ridiculous. What's the point of that? I'm like, well, aim high, hit high for a start. But also, if you think small, you only design small solutions, right? If you think big, you might mess the solution up. You might completely ruin the process. But even the ruined outcome will still be better, more sophisticated and bigger than what you otherwise would have designed beforehand, right? And so like people kind of aim small and hit small, right? And as a result of that, you know, this whole like, I'm going to think 6 months forward or even 3 months or 2 months forward. It's like, but that's the whole reason you end up constantly in this chase mentality is you're only designing the solution to help you in 8 weeks. It'll take you 8 weeks to build it. Then by the time you get there, you've got that problem again, but slightly bigger. And then you design slightly bigger and slightly bigger and slightly bigger. But you never actually go, well, I'm going to design the solution that'll work for me in 3 years. And I can get that done in 3 months. And then that gives me 2 years and 9 months worth of freedom, like conceptually, right? But a lot of people kind of mess that up, right? And again, like relating to the sweats thing, this was actually, one of the huge errors on my part, being a non-technical founder and a non-technical leader. I was only designing things to work today and providing insight to say, we want to build this to work today. And never once was I going, hey, well, we might actually have to support this on 400 different devices on several different platforms. We might have to support this in 11 or 12 languages. Like, never was the consideration.
Yeah.
Because it was always designed for now.
So my question is why? Why does this happen, right? And because fundamentally, is it the mismanagement of what we've been talking about in terms of the investment side? Because the follow-up question for me was about the investment side of this. It's like, you got to have a really, really, really great accountant, but at some point you also have to understand it yourself.
Yeah.
What causes that kind of real short-term kind of almost like chasing the market instead of building the market, that you're gonna grow into?
Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes back to capability, right? But like, in saying that, there's a lot of logic and a lot of data as well to support the fact that knowing too much actually ruins businesses.
Okay.
Right, because if you know too much, you won't do dumb things, and a lot of really great things are discovered by doing dumb things, right? Like as an example, right? Like, I give you a wonderful example. So we were making 20 or 30 million bucks a year, like a 50% EBITDA margin when I was at like 23 years old or whatever, selling ebooks, right? Greatest thing ever. There's no logic at that point in time to put that business in the bin and then go make an app. None. Mm-hmm. But that was what we did for a variety of other reasons. That was what we did, and that was a decision I made, and was my idea to do stupid shit and then go and test it. That ultimately paid off, right? If you were a really experienced business person, and this is exactly what my accountant at the time said to me, is like, that's a really dumb idea. Why would you risk 20, 30 million bucks a year at a 50% EBITDA margin? Why risk that? Like, what for what point? So you can go and make less margin with less certainty, potentially lose a whole bunch of money.
Investment.
Yeah, massive investment. There's not, and like, I completely messed up the process, like blew up the whole business on the way to doing it. Just was really quickly remediated the errors and issues. But so the point is that it's ultimately a capability gap, but you don't want to have like too much, because if you do, sometimes you don't do the things that are silly that are needed. But I think one thing, as I kind of reflect on this, is a lot of founders are really hungry to get the win, no different to what I was, which is very important, and you need to have that. There's also kind of this like need for practicality and planning and long-term thinking or strategy, which I talk about quite a lot. And so I think to kind of to describe this, I think the perfect, or at least a much better environment to be in, and this is the reason why mentors and coaches and boards or advisory boards or whatever exist, is you have people who are in the business, running the business, who are effectively blind.
Yeah,
right.
Literally.
They're blind to anything more than a few months in the future, unless they're quite experienced and that's a natural. They have a natural aptitude for that. More often than not, they're going to be blind to the medium to long-term future. So it can be, for those people in that scenario, so long as they're making huge progress in the immediate tasks, that's great. But then having a mentor or advisor or a chairman or a board or an advisory board or a committee or whatever it might be, and they're all different things with their own nuance, right? But like, having those is great because it creates tension, right? And I have this in one of the companies I founded a few years ago, right? Like, myself and the CEO, like, we're constantly like smashing, because I'm like, long term, and he's like, revenue. I'm like, long term, but that's good. Like that actually needs to be there, right? In order for businesses to do good, that has to be a consideration. And again, coming back to one of the examples I provided before about people reading these stories about like Facebook or PayPal or Uber or Airbnb that do these like economically ridiculous things that play off in the long term. That's great. What you also don't hear about those companies is the venture funds that are investing in those businesses have teams of people and teams of founders and advisors and their network and whatever, who have, they have tens or hundreds of people who are like, yep, cool, marketplace, technological expansion, geographical expansion into Europe, into these countries in this industry. Yeah, I got 30 people that have done that before. and then they come in and they help with it. It's not a team of 3 or 4 people that are founders, first time, have done nothing, that then go off and do it. You never hear about any of that. All you see is the story through the founder's eyes and this massive, rocketing success. But there's actually a lot more stuff that goes on in the background that you never ever hear about that actually is designed to support people to go on those ridiculous journeys, right?
So it sounds to me, and this is just from like listening to you talk, and I can kind of see where we started and why it's important, like the strategy. But I think for me, it's like entrepreneur will drive. Mm-hmm. It's important also for the entrepreneur to sit back and just reassess where they want to be in, like you said, the 10-year, the 5-year, the 1 year, and you need to do that. And kind of bringing this back to your journey, you obviously went through that initial growth period with the ebooks, and then you probably had time to sit down and reassess and go, okay, there's this thing happening over here with apps, and potentially we want to get in on that. And so then there becomes this new kind of point of, this new point where you reassess from and look to do that. And then the next kind of question from me is, how did your role as, say, founder, CEO, change through those different phases, because I imagine, and it sounds like, and you kind of talked about it, boards, coaches, mentors, accountants, whatever it is, that support network need to be your tension, because as the entrepreneur, because you are looking over here, you're going to drive as hard as you can there, and getting the right people around you, even in the form of staff, are there to build the tension to make sure that you're not making these kind of fundamentally fatal mistakes.
Yeah, and the journey for me, which is really kind of, again, categorically similar or the same for for pretty much everyone, not everybody, but for most people, is this kind of elusive journey from being in the business to being on the business in terms of the work that you do, right? So I am doing tasks today that need to be delivered to get this project to market or whatever it is, versus I'm thinking about what actually are the future projects we need to do to deliver this goal, right? And so, for like to go back to kind of really early, right? I'm writing ads, writing emails, writing blogs, responding to customer support tickets. When we got to first office, I'm painting the walls, I'm going to the furniture shop, like I'm doing all that, stuff, right? And, for a variety of reasons, but the overwhelming one basically being that I had very poor leadership and management skills early on, meant that I ended up doing a lot of these tasks, like, up until the point that we were doing like 50, 60, $70 million a year in revenue, right? Which I was regularly called insane for, and that's probably not an untrue statement, at that point in time. There was I went through this kind of like cyclical journey for a couple of years, which was very frustrating, and again, is a reflection of me kind of being very inexperienced, for what I was doing. But I was like, okay, cool, we have no managers. I'll go and recruit people with the job title manager in it. So you can go and do that, recruit 3 people, and it's like, well, they have manager in their title. I'm not really sure what that means, and I don't think they know what that means either. I'm like, okay, well, we'll recruit senior manager. And so we went through these loops and loops and loops and loops. And for the longest time, I always knew what I needed and knew what I wanted and whatever, but didn't really have the skills to bring it to life and find the right people, which, I think understanding org design and recruitment is it is such a skill and an incredibly valuable one. But again, you can't be good at that without understanding strategy, because what are you recruiting for, right? Strategy drives structure, right? And so eventually, kind of got to this point, and I had a few good recruits at like the head of or director level in our business that really, I recruited them to do stuff for the business, and then I learned so much, off of observing them, and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting paid to learn from really smart people here. And we had a couple of really great ones. We recruited some, human resources people, that were really great. We recruited a couple of product people, which I was able to learn some good stuff from as well. We had, probably for me, and what I can kind of observe with a lot of people at the moment, one of, if not the most pivotal roles I recruited was, at the time we recruited for an operations manager, but the goal was always to have a COO, or Chief Operating Officer. That man, Adam, is actually now the CEO of the business. Since I've stepped down, like hands down, like a massive fork in the road for the business. This guy completely changed everything and was able to effectively listen to me, say, hey, I think we kind of need this sort of thing. And he'd be like, cool, no, it's actually this, and this is what it looks like, and we're going to do it this way. And I was like, awesome, and off we go. And him and I had, like, in my opinion, and I'm sure he'd said the same, like a really, really strong working relationship, so critically aligned on so many things. But this guy's got 15, 20 years experience building international businesses, right? And this was another one of those moments for me. Yes, the journey is great for a variety of reasons, but I was like, oh my God, like I'm learning from just a wealth of knowledge here.
Yeah.
And that completely changed the organization. That for me, honestly, I don't think we would have achieved a lot of what we did if we didn't recruit, not just that role, but that man in particular. Like, he was just such a big contributor to the business and to me as an individual.
It's such an... It's it's crazy what happens when you get someone like that into your business.
Yeah.
And instead of, because you mentioned it before, but it's good to great.
Yeah, Jim Collins.
Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Like you either build a business with 1,000 helpers, or and what we're talking about just there is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
Not the constraint is never you anymore. And when you get someone like that into the business, you can kind of see the power that it brings to it, which is great. And so the CEO role, because the phases in your business and your role as a CEO fundamentally changed because and this is what you're saying, is you went from working in the business to then the only thing you were doing was working on the business.
I wouldn't say only, but much more of.
Yeah.
Effectively at the end of the journey, and again, this was not, I don't think it would be fair to say this was my achievement. It was probably more Adam's achievement and more broadly the team's achievement. But, not kind of including, general weekly meetings that I have to check in on, my direct reports. The business was almost being run in like 5 or 6 meetings a month. And that sounds like really extreme, but and this was something that I actually learnt, off of Adam. We were able to set up 5 or 6 kind of like really key, big, important meetings, and some of them would go for a day, right? Some of them go for 10 hours or even spread across 2 days. But by having this structure in place and whatever, we were able to do that, which then allowed me a huge amount of time to just, do research, gather insights, meet with other people in the industry, make kind of big long-term decisions, ultimately, focus on selling the company and whatever as well. But, structuring the organization, so that it is run in a decentralized manner, so that it's not dependent on me showing up. I can contribute to it, but it's not dependent on me showing up, so that I can then focus more on the long term. That was always kind of the goal, which, to be honest, we probably really only achieved as we were selling the organization. Right? Yeah.
But it's funny. That was the plan, right? That was this, when we talk about that long-term objective, it's what is it? Is it Parkinson's law, or it's like you set yourself that time? Or
how much time you allow yourself is how
always just on time type thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we go, the last segment we do is quick fire, so it's just kind of, I do have to preface, it's not quick fire, it's just answers to questions. But
sure.
How do you become a better entrepreneur then? And I know that's a big question, but more just on a broad stance, if you look back at your career and you're obviously still going strong, what do you attest to becoming a better entrepreneur? Because some people would say education, but what is it?
Yeah. I mean, to answer the question specifically, what do you need to do to become a better entrepreneur? Not what do you need to have or any of those sorts of things. I think one of the overarching things which, and just to be clear again, this worked for me. This might not be a philosophy that works for everyone else, but I always found that the thing that made things easier for me over time in leaps and bounds progressively throughout the journey was that, I had a desire, I ultimately had a desire to become a great business person. Right, so if we just forget the term entrepreneur for a sec, right, kind of pull that away, it's being a great business person, in my opinion, there's plenty of people that are good at marketing, plenty of people that are good at product, ops, like, one thing here, there, or the other place, right? But I've always had the view to actually be really good at marketing, you have to be a good business person. To be really good at finance, you have to be a good business person. To be good at HR, you have to be a good business person. Being good at a function does not make you a good business person, right? In the same way that being a good business person doesn't make you an amazing marketer, right?
Yeah, okay.
But being a really good business person means that you understand the machine.
Okay, yeah.
Right? You understand how business works. So you understand what the rules and principles and axioms are, to start, grow, manage, sell a business, whatever it is. And the reason why, to me, that's the most important is because you have a way of thinking about business problems, right? If you're a marketing person, you only have a way of thinking about marketing problems, maybe, right? A lot of people rely on, tactics and shit they've implemented in other businesses. But like, if I was to take, cool, we did heaps of social media marketing and community management at Sweat and go and work with this mining parts manufacturer.
Yeah.
You think there's a community of people doing that on Instagram? Like, I don't think so, right? So by being a good business person, you can be good in any business. And that was always, like, I always said to myself, strive for excellence in business.
Yeah.
Like, don't just strive for excellence in your business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it talks to as well, like you talked about understanding the machine. And I think that in itself is just such great advice because all the problems you face in business probably come from not understanding the machine. A lot of the fundamental problems, like you kind of talked about it in terms of you build a business where the focus is you, or and then you become the constraint, is because you don't truly understand the machine. And I think that's a journey in itself. And that it even kind of talks to what we were talking about at the beginning of like business coaches and this kind of stuff. But like, you only can truly understand the machine from building the machine, and because like observing. In theory, observing 100%, but I think in theory you can understand it, but then how to solve the particular problems, it's like the excellence mastery thing, like over and over again.
Literally was just about to say, like, I think if the goal is to like master business or achieve business excellence or be an excellent business person, or however you choose to kind of phrase that, right, in order to be great or master anything, a prerequisite for that is to actually understand mastery in general, right? And I'm sure lots of people have kind of heard of this notion of like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? That people ultimately, it's this kind of balance or visualization of competence versus confidence, right? And people who are really confident are normally the ones who are not that good at what they're doing, right? And in business, unfortunately, and especially for founders, right? How is their confidence built? Well, they're in an environment where they're the leader, they pay the bills, they recruit people, they make all the money, they're making the decisions, they're in control. Right, and so they have why I often refer to this as like the Midas touch bias, right? I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's what I call it, right? It's like, more often than not, if the business has some degree of success and kind of runs for a couple of years and grows, well, it's my business, I did this, I touched it, like, it's great. All of my ideas are the reason that it's great, right? And so they have this perspective that, well, I must be good at business. Almost all the time, that statement is untrue. They were good at something that helped them build a business. That doesn't make their business great. It doesn't make them great at business. It doesn't make them masters of, the art of, founding, growing, selling, whatever it might be, organizations. And unfortunately for a lot of people, founders, they get trapped in this mindset where they're like, well, I've done a lot and achieved a lot, therefore I must be great. Survivorship bias is another way of articulating a version of that, right? But unfortunately, that's not true. That's not a representation of the fact that you're great. And you see this all the time with people going, yep, I understand why my business is growing. It's super simple. At that point in time,
turn off the radio.
At that point in time in the conversation, like in most contexts, especially as it relates to business, it's like, cool. So subscription is super simple, right? Acquire more than you lose. Awesome. Right, but cool, that's great, but now what, and how does that actually work in the real world? Like, it's not, none of these things are simple. I get a lot of respect for people when they're asked questions, and I know it's like, watch their content online, and the answer is normally like, well, sometimes, or it depends, or maybe if this is true, like, because they're at a level of skill, knowledge, and competence where they're able to understand that nuance is everywhere and that things are actually incredibly complicated, right? Unfortunately, founders don't live in a reality or a world where they're able to experience that, which is why, coming back to the whole advisory board or mentor or coach or whatever it might be, they're really valuable because they provide a completely unbiased view, and hopefully they're kind of comfortable calling founders on their shit if that's where they find themselves.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a really good conversation for people to just listen to around, and it kind of touches on what we were talking about, like mastery and why you should aim to be a great business person.
Yeah.
Because then you'll ask the right questions.
Well, yeah, you're focusing on the right stuff. Like a lot of people go, oh, well, I want to grow my business. It's like, but again, we go right back to the beginning. It's like, is that even, is growth even the answer? And if so, to what problem? Yeah.
And you got to want to answer that question, right? Like there's a difference. There's a difference between wanting to be told the answer and to actually wanting to understand the answer. And I think that's the difference. That's what makes you a great business person.
Yep.
Because when you want to be a great business person, you want to understand the answer to that question so deeply that you can start to repeat that process.
And and you're happy to face into the discomfort, right? Like, I mean, one of the overwhelming, and repeated learnings that I see working with other people trying to build their organization is that, like, how willing are you to engage in uncertainty and discomfort, right? Because that, like, uncertainty and discomfort comes in like a variety of forms, along the founder's journey, the arc of the journey, however you want to kind of view that, right? But, the discomfort to accept that maybe you don't know, the discomfort to accept that maybe you need to learn, the discomfort to accept that maybe you don't even know what it is you don't even know. Like there's all there's all these things, right? But they're incredibly uncomfortable, and you see from the outside a lot. And I spent a lot of time working with a huge amount of different venture funds in my journey with Sweat. And one of the learnings that a lot of people shared with me was that they spent a lot of time trying to understand the founder, because the founder is more often than not the ceiling that's placed in the business. It's not normally the business that places a ceiling, or the industry or the market or whatever that causes the barrier, right? It's more often than not the founder. That's really uncomfortable for founders to hear, and acknowledge.
I think it talks to the growth that you must try to strive for. Yeah. Internally, not externally.
Yeah.
All right, quick fire.
Shoot, let's do it.
One piece of advice for your younger self.
Be more comfortable being wrong.
Why?
Because when I was much younger and early in the journey, I felt like if I was wrong, it represented that I wasn't capable of being a leader. When later on I realized that being able to be regularly wrong and publicly wrong is actually a representation of great leadership. And so now knowing that, and having gotten much more comfortable with that later in my journey, I just how much more time would have been saved, and money and emotion would have been saved, if I was just like, you know what, you're wrong, man, and let people know that that you're wrong and they're right.
I think about what you were saying before around competence and confidence, and I think true confidence comes when you are able to say that I'm probably wrong, or I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Because then you can question, and you can be vulnerable with other people.
Yeah.
Factors into management and so on, I found massively. So I love that. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who's just starting a business?
When we say just starting, let me just calibrate. I just want to make sure I get an answer. So the product is live, like they're selling something already?
No, I would say they've got an idea, and they're about to choose whether or not this is their journey. They're going to embark on it. Yeah.
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, like, lots of people will say this, and it's incredibly cliche, but like, just go and try. Like at the end of the day, more things are killed before they start than after they start, right? Because there's a lot more people that have great ideas, and great being very subjective, right? But like great ideas that could potentially come something that they don't, because they're worried about failing, they're worried about what their friend might think, or their mum, or their partner, or whatever, right? And just to be clear, like I can even relate to that now. Like I sit here now after having built multiple businesses, sold one, raising money for a couple of other ones I own, working with lots of people now. Like I still second guess myself from time to time, but like I try to become aware of that and deliberately face into it, which is a skill. as well. But like for people who are just kind of getting started, it's like you, not to be rude, but a really kind of like blunt and objective statement would be, you don't even have enough knowledge to know why you might fail. So
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and so purely as a result of that, don't be so arrogant to think that you know you will fail. Just go and do it, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite a savage way, like, of looking at it.
It's a great reframe, though.
It's a very honest reframe.
No, I love it. Okay, so what's the most important trait that a founder must have for success, and why?
Look, based on the people that I work with now, and kind of just experience working with teams and whatever over the years, I think, again, multifactorial question, right? Yeah.
That's why I say quick fire.
Yeah. But so I think if I had to kind of go like hard and fast, it'd probably be that I think, becoming and trying to become emotionally aware, I think would be a really important one. Largely because most problems in business are people, and mostly the person or people that are creating the problems is you. But you don't very often realize that until way later. So if you're spending more time on one thing, I think that's a good area to invest.
Yeah, it's especially as a founder. Usually everything spreads through the company. And
yeah, very much.
Love it. Awesome, mate. I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show. I could sit here all day and do this.
Me too. I'm sure you can see that.
I'm very lucky to be able to have the conversation. So extremely grateful. I know time's precious as well, so appreciate that. Johnny boy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, man.
Not thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for putting it together. Where can everybody find you? Obviously on Instagram.
Yeah.
Handle is
Tobi_Pearce.
Is there anything else?
Yeah. Not to be honest, not really. Like, I'm pretty lazy on that sort of stuff. But for anyone listening to this, like wherever they're at in the journey or whatever they're doing, like I'd love to hear from you. Love to be able to help. Love to be able to understand what part of the journey they're on and see if I can provide some value. I mean, like I think I said before we officially started recording, I'm just passionate about business in general. Like, this is my sport obsession, it's my food obsession, whatever it is.
Okay.
This is what I'm about. So no question is silly, like no business is silly, no idea is silly, no nothing. Like I want to hear from people and kind of see what they have to say. So yeah, please hit me up on Instagram. Love to have a chat and connect.
Yeah, awesome. I think it rings true as well, just from the conversation we've had. And to everyone listening, a massive thanks for all the support. Without you guys, we don't get to have these conversations. So really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much, man.